I'm Sean Adler, and like the people who founded Udemy, I'm also an alumni of the Founder Institute Accelerator. I completed my bachelor's in Chinese with honors, received a scholarship from the Chinese government to study at a WHO Collaborative Center, and then completed a graduate degree in biotech and bioinformatics programming at Johns Hopkins, which has the top biomedical engineering program in the world. I've been featured in Forbes and numerous other, global media outlets. My podcasts are also available on Spotify and Amazon. I've been training in martial arts off and on for about 25 years. Shingi and Bagua for about 13. I'm Sean Adler, and like the people who founded Udemy, I'm also an alumni of the Founder Institute Accelerator. I completed my bachelor's in Chinese with honors, received a scholarship from the Chinese government to study at a WHO Collaborative Center, and then completed a graduate degree in biotech and bioinformatics programming at Johns Hopkins, which has the top biomedical engineering program in the world. I've been featured in Forbes and numerous other, global media outlets. My podcasts are also available on Spotify and Amazon. Okay, so training efficiently means using the least amount of equipment possible to get as much results as possible. And so for this, you really just need a yoga strap and blocks. It doesn't matter if you are using books or bricks instead of blocks, so long as the shape of the object is symmetrical for both, or if you're using a belt for a yoga strap. If it works, it works. I'm performing the stretches on concrete because I've been training in martial arts off and on for about 25 years, Shingi and Bagua for about 13. And so I've done enough impact conditioning that it doesn't faze me as much. I would recommend doing this on a yoga mat or, some sort of cushioned surface initially. Okay, so what is the difference between static, dynamic, and ballistic stretching? And so obviously static, you're sitting there, you're holding it, you're breathing, but you're not really moving all that much. Ballistic, you are throwing something. You could be essentially throwing your torso around while you're circling it. You could be throwing your arms and legs back and forth in some way. And it really just refers to it as some sort of a projectile. And when you do it, that's kind of how it should look. And then so for dynamic, you're looking at some kind of a functional movement. And so squats, lunges, etc. And you'll notice that if you do some kind of strength training in addition to the stretching, you'll actually get more efficient. Like your body is still working when you stretch. So I would recommend warming up with ballistic stretching, and then doing this, like the progressions as static stretches via double max, and then cool down with some of the more dynamic movements like squatting, lunging, circling. And that way you can kind of do things comprehensively. In terms of repetitions, I think any more than 12 for something that is a ballistic or dynamic exercise is a waste of time, because you're no longer building strength at that point and you're building endurance instead. And to do this, you should probably just cap it at 12. If you are some kind of a performance artist, or if you are actively fighting, you probably want to do higher repetitions, because at that point it's not just about conditioning and functional movement, it's about reflexes. And so to train a movement reflexively, you need to do it hundreds or thousands of times. But if your goal is just to kind of get more flexible, training one or two movements, for hundreds of times is not a good use of your time. So the exercise progressions to get to a full front split before back leg folds or with them is just back lunges and single leg forward folds, king pigeon and a half front split, and then full front split. And you do the exact same forward folds and toe touches and back leg folds in any of those three variations. And the purpose of that is so you can load and deload each movement. And so, let's say you can do, the back lunge, and you're working on something in king pigeon, but your legs are too tight there. So you can revisit the back lunge, you can do the front and back leg folds, and then go back to a more difficult exercise. And, that works for the entire ladder. And for the straddle splits, it's just butterfly, pancake, and then full straddle. And you don't need to do a lot of other stretches for a straddle split if you're already doing the exercises for the front splits, because it targets pretty much everything anyways. And so that allows you to spend more time customizing instead of doing a predefined routine. Okay, so there are 6 main exercises for the front splits and 3 for straddle splits, and you honestly don't need to train more than that, because the structure and the variations, along with some of like the dynamic exercises, will get you there. It's unwise to just do static stretching, and so what this emphasizes is a mix of static, ballistic, and dynamic stretching. And so when you watch, an athlete move, whether they are a yogi, a martial artist, a dancer, or a gymnast, you'll realize that they all have incredible degrees of flexibility, but that they utilize it dynamically. And so when you do exercises, like, lunges or kicks or jumps or whatever, you can build flexibility functionally as well as statically. And that's a better way to go. So the purpose of the program design is essentially just to get you to train efficiently and flexibly, in a way that you can customize at the highest level. Anything in terms of fitness or conditioning is really just individualized. And so there are a few exercises and progressions, and that will essentially get you to where you need to be. For some people it may take months, for other people it may take years. With that being said, there's really no right way to train. Okay. And so one of the last things to get into is going to be loading schemes. And pyramids are sort of a good way to do this. And you can do ascending, descending pyramids, flat loading, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you are a little bit tired the day that you do it, you probably want to do a flat loading or an ascending pyramid. If you feel really good and you're well rested and it's a fresh workout, you can do a descending pyramid. And so obviously, like, ascending pyramids are where you start with an easier exercise and then you go to progressively more difficult exercises. And descending pyramids are where you go from a difficult exercise to a simple exercise. And the whole purpose of periodization is to continue to sort of challenge your body so you don't plateau. And the way, so it would work simply this way. So let's say you're working on a front split. If you want to do an ascending pyramid for any of the exercises, you could do, back lunge holds followed by king pigeon holds followed by front split holds. Obviously, descending pyramid would just be the reverse. So front split holds, king pigeon holds, and back lunge holds. You want to keep the pyramids consistent though, and so you don't want to be doing a front or back leg fold in any of the exercises, and then not do that front or back leg fold in a different exercise within the same pyramid, because that's an indication that you are overdoing it, and you should restructure the way you're training. So in terms of hold times, it's always best to work with a 1 rep max. And so before you do an exercise, just try it out and hold it for as long as you can. If you can do it for 60 seconds, then you can just move on to the next one. Any longer than that is probably a waste of your time. I would say 15 seconds minimum. And so if you can do, 1 rep max of, let's say, a full front split with or without a back leg fold, and you're holding it for 30 seconds, your double max is 60 seconds, you then divide those 60 seconds by, as many sets as you need to complete them. And so you can go with longer durations and fewer sets, or more sets at a shorter duration. You can customize the rest time in between. Ultimately, there's no right way to get there, and it depends on what you're training and what your goals are. And I would sort of build the sets and the repetitions around that. I do not recommend changing the core exercises, although there are 500,000 variations in every single one of these exercises, and that's kind of the point of choosing them. Okay, so anybody who has done some kind of a martial art or gone to a dance class is probably familiar with the concept of tensegrity. That's just dynamic muscle tension. And so your body is relaxed, but your movements are structured because you're maintaining this sort of a stretch throughout the process. And people in ballet will do this, people in martial arts will do this. And that's important to do in every single movement. When it comes down to the breathing, splits are not a cakewalk for most people. It'll probably hurt a little bit, if not a considerable amount, when you first get started. And so when you breathe, you want to focus on essentially pulling something from your toes to the crown of your head, and then from the crown of your head to your toes. And so that way you'll sort of focus on relaxing the entire body up and down or down and up, and that will sort of ease any kind of pain or tension. It's unlikely to eliminate it, but it'll make the process significantly easier. Okay, so as for breathing, it's important to hold at least one inhale and exhale in every single exercise. It doesn't matter if this is a joint rotation or a kick or the splits itself. And if you can't, the exercise is probably too difficult. And so aside from the way the exercises are structured and how they're performed, it's important to keep in mind what you should be doing in any of the exercises. And so universal concepts like breathing and dynamic muscle tension, some people refer to it as tensegrity, are important in all of the movements. And so for most people, the front splits are not going to be a cakewalk, and it may be somewhat uncomfortable. And that's where the breathing and any kind of mindfulness becomes pretty important, because it allows you to continue to push yourself, and also just sort of be calm about it. And so when you do it, you want to make sure that you can do at least one whole inhale and exhale for the duration of the stretch, or any given movement. So every single exercise should have at least a cycle of one inhale or exhale. If you can't take a full breath in any single exercise, it's too difficult. And conventional wisdom says to expand your stomach and then sort of contract it on the inhale and the exhale respectively. Don't do that. You should feel some kind of an expansion or contraction while you're doing it, but you shouldn't be moving your abdomen at all. And that will cause some kind of a dynamic tension and stretch, without compromising the physical structure of the movement that you're practicing. And when it comes down to like tensegrity, that's how you maintain the shape of the movement. The shape of the movement is what allows you to train continuously and not get injured. All right, and so anything that your body does functionally is scientific. Otherwise, it just simply couldn't happen. And so the methodology by which you train is more important than what you train. And so the best way to get to a more difficult exercise like a full front split or a straddle or front and back leg folds in them is really just to work with a 1 rep max. And so for each exercise, hold it for as long as you possibly can, up to 60 seconds. More than 60 seconds and you're wasting your time. And then take the hold time, multiply it by 2, and then divide it into a number of sets. And so if you can hold it for 45 seconds, you now have 90 seconds to break up over as many sets as you want. And so this is good because if you want to, do something more difficult, you can do more sets with longer rest times, or you can sort of condense and recondense depending on what your schedule is like and sort of what your goals are. If you're actually trying to do these kind of moves, I would recommend training at least 2 to 3 times a week. Conversely to what a lot of people say, you don't need to, do stretches or dynamic exercises every single day. Okay, so once you can get to the final exercise progression, you'll want to know how to just get into a front split. The simplest way to do this would be to just do it from a back lunge. And so gradually just slide your back leg away from your front leg until both are on the ground. For a straddle, the simplest way to do it is just to start from a butterfly stretch and then kick your legs out. In the videos, I've done a number of variations in terms of how you can enter into the stretch. And so there are demos of jumping into a straddle or a front split on 1 or 2 arms, or sliding into them, or transitioning from a straddle split to a front split, or kicking into it from downward facing dog. And so feel free to play around with any of those, but ultimately the way that you enter into it is not going to be as important until later on, and it's also going to be highly dependent on how you're training.